Hey everybody, ronarray here, and the prices for good items are going very high right now, so crafting seems like an acceptable alternative in some cases. And in my previous video, I showcased how to craft all items for hybrid builds with evasion and energy shell. However, I missed two items, and in this video, I'm going to showcase step-by-step guide how to craft a weapon and how to craft a good ring as well, which you can also use for any other build too. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you appreciate such guides, and let's go. So when we are talking about the weapon, the first is the base. So at the moment the base that you can get is Sinister Quarterstaff. The main reason why Sinister is the best is higher critical hit chance. 12% instead of usual 10% on most of the bases is a huge advantage for almost all possible monk builds. So if you're on a heavy budget or you want to gamble bases, you can just start buying basic variations of Sinister stuff, just set critical hit chance to 12, item level to 80 and item rarity to normal, and you will be able to buy a lot of Sinister Quarterstaff for about 3 exalts at the moment. It can go up to 5, I believe. So since bases are pretty cheap, you can also try to roll them. However, this process is very tedious, because most of the time you're not going to receive anything good on the bases, and it will require tremendous amount of attempts. So in that case, just use Perfect Orb of Transmutation on all bases, and as you can see, most of them rolled pretty bad. So I would throw everything else away except the middle one with attack speed, which got tier 2 cold damage, which is pretty solid at the moment. So for the rest of them, if you roll in a bad suffix, you can still try and proceed forward clicking it with Perfect Orb of Augmentation, hoping for a good prefix. However, if for some reason you got a bad prefix, you need to throw out that weapon away almost immediately. That one ended up probably the best. We have like a pretty nice tier 2 flat damage together with attack speed, which is definitely not perfect. So in that strategy, we're just going to use the cheapest possible option, trying to achieve at least something, going for the Quarterstaff. So now, if you have a weapon with an understandably good prefix such as flat damage and pretty decent suffix, it could be critical, it could be attack speed, it could be plus levels, could be anything. The easiest and cheapest way, however a pretty RNG based one, is just to click it with one basic essence. We have only 2 possible options. We either using a critical essence for seeking, or we're using electricity essence for lightning damage. So that heavily depends on the approach, but since we already have one great suffix, I'm probably going to use a greater essence of electricity. However, going for essence of seeking is a decent option as well. In that case, I'm just clicking it with essence, and I'm getting pretty decent flat damage. It's about 500 flat damage already. So next step would be to try and get plus levels, because that's one of the most important things. So for that, I'm going to use Preserved Jawbones, and we can also make sure that we are getting suffix in that case. So Dextral Necromancy together with Preserved Jawbone is going to guarantee suffix for us. And that part depends on the budget. Since we can't guarantee much right now, we will need to slam. It's pretty subpar in terms of how good it is, but craft currently has a lot of RNG. Keep in mind that there's a chance that it's not going to add up too good. So if your weapon is absolutely amazing, there's a chance to use a perfect Exalt Orb for a slam, but if it's just decent like that one, we're just going to use Summon of Greater Exaltation and Greater Exalt Orb for a slam. I got physical damage, and I still have my prefix together with physical damage leached as life. It's pretty alright, because at the moment, just total DPS of that weapon is about 540, which is very nice considering we still don't have runes and we have our crit. So to finish that one up, we're just going to buy a reroll, because I believe it's worth it. So right here we can just go and reveal it with a reroll. Our best chance is to get plus levels, because that's going to be pretty effective. So let's reveal, and as you can see, all suffixes are bad. Let's reroll once again, and as you can see, the second setup is pretty bad as well. So the biggest upside of such approach is how cheap it is. Since you're barely paying for anything, you can just pay for one essence which costs nothing, for basic Preserved Jawbone and Omen of Dextral Necromancy. So in that case, getting something very cheap for like 10 exalted is expected, and you can just keep redoing the Quarterstaff up until you will hit something good with that. So if instead you're going to roll the physical damage as right there, you can just use a little different essence too. Since you already have the physical, you can just go for physical essence as well. Right here. And for that example, it's going to go the same. I'm clicking it with Essence of Abrasion, and we're going to do the rest of the things the same. So like Dextral Necromancy, Preserved Jawbone for Suffix Desecration, and after that we can just use Greater Exaltation with Exalted Orb for the last two mods. So as you can see, I got pretty useless setup right here, since I got Lightning, but it's not too horrible at the moment. Also, pretty important part, every time when you're checking your weapon, don't forget to add the runes. The default runes should be iron runes in all cases, so don't forget to add them inside to check for the damage. For example, that weapon is going to be about 612 DPS with the runes. Since it never rolled a proper suffix, unfortunately it will not work out that good. Try to reveal that again, and right here we don't have a single good thing. And right here we have only critical damage bonus. So getting plus level right here, as you can see, is not very good in terms of chances. You can still sell them for maybe like 10, 25 exalts, that's what price checkers give me for that one. But most of the time you just throwing bad ones away, because most of them worth absolutely nothing. So next option, if you don't want to roll the bases or try a lot of times and just hope for RNG, is just going for more expensive variation, which will require an attempt with a pretty good magic base already. So right here you can get a Sinister Staff with 12% crit, magic variation with cold, fire, lightning, physical or increased physical damage, and plus 4 level melee skills for about 14 divines. That's a pretty big amount of currency, and obviously rolling the bases is probably going to be a better option, because if you will just keep rolling, you will most of the time hit something nice. However, it can save you some time, and you can just take and use a stuff like that. So if you want to pay less, there's a few options how you can get the base for less. First off, instead of all of that, you can go for Elemental Damage with Attacks prefix. That prefix is pretty good, especially if you're on a budget, and that will allow you to get the base for approximately 5 divines right now at Sinister Quarterstaff. And if you want to make it even cheaper, you can lower the crit and get it for approximately 45 exalteds. Just always make sure that your critical hit chance is at least 10. It's pretty important. So the cheapest base will be like 45 exalteds right there, and you can just keep trying on that one. I recommend to look at the DPS of the bases. There should be approximately 130, 138, 140 is a little better option, so just check for any variations that working. And if you don't want to go for elemental damage with attacks, you can always go for something basic like that, so just flat damage. That way it's going to be about 4 divines for a base which is not really sinister. So right there, let's take any base for 4 divines, for example. You can just use a proper essence for it, and at the moment, since you already have plus level skills, it's heavily recommended to use a critical chance essence. So just going for a greater essence of Seeking is probably the best idea most of the time. So right here, you just click on it with essence, and you have a higher crit, which is kinda nice. Since you already have a good suffix, you don't care about the last one. Instead, you're going to try and get a good prefix. For that, you will need to use Omen of Sinister Necromancy, and you will need to desecrate the prefix. So Sinister Necromancy desecrated the prefix, and after that you can just use Greater Exaltation together with Greater Exalted Orb. So after hitting with Greater Exalted, as you can see, I got a physical damage plus accuracy, which is definitely not amazing, and stun duration. In that case, if you see that option is not good, you can try to avoid using reroll. However, if you're paying more for a base, like you're paying 5 divines for a base, for example, there is a big chance that it's still beneficial for you. Don't try and get the reroll because it costs less than a divine at the moment. However, if you're using bases for like 40 exalts, it's much easier for you to just avoid rerolling if your weapon is not looking amazing at the moment. Let me just reroll that and hope you'll get a pretty decent prefix. As you can see, the only thing we can hope for is just a basic physical or physical damage percent. At the moment, I believe the basic physical is going to be a little better, but they're kinda close to each other. So for example, right here, I think we've been a little unlucky with our roll. It still could be sold for at least 2 divines approximately at the moment. But keep in mind that every base, if you're going for a mid variation, could cost 4 divines, and more expensive one could cost up to 14. So there's a lot of RNG involved. So let's try to do that again on a weapon with like fire damage and level of all melee skills. That base by itself has a pretty decent price, so keep in mind that if you're doing it, there's always a risk that you might lose currency, especially if you will be unlucky enough. So I'm using the critical essence right now, reaching 15% of critical, which is very good at Sinister. After that, I'm using Sinister Necromancy and Preserve Jawbone to get our prefix up. And after that, if you believe that base is good enough, you can always try to hit it with Perfect Exalted too. But at the moment, I don't really believe that even expensive bases are worth it. However, just for the experiment right here, I'm going to use a Perfect instead. You can still use Greater Exalt Orbs since it's absolutely fine. Don't forget the Omen of Greater Exaltation. So I'm hitting it with a Perfect with Greater Exaltation, and I ended up with tier 4 lightning damage, which is very good at the moment. Same goes for Jawbone. You can also go for the Jawbone, which is going to be higher level, but at the moment I think let's just end it up like that. And don't forget the reroll since we already paid a lot for the base and for Perfect Exalted Orb. So let's reveal it. We have physical, we have some cold, and right now we have about 39 to 65 cold. It's pretty subpar. And for something like this, I believe getting something like Greater Storm Runes is going to help a lot with additional DPS. So talking about the price for something like that. First off, the most important part and why weapon like that would be expensive is just getting critical hit chance up. So when I'm using my price checker right here, we have plus 4 levels of melee skills and 15% critical chance, which is absolutely huge. It's about 540 DPS. As you can see, the weapons like that go for 60-65 divines, but it's still a pretty big risk. As you can see, I bought the base for 15 divines, I risked to click it with Perfect, and there's a chance that I might miss it. So if you're doing it, keep in mind that you might need a few different attempts to end up with something which is going to cost 60 divines or 50 divines or any decent amount of currency. Now let's talk about crafting the ring. So for the ring, I think it's pretty basic at the moment. First off, you need to get a base, and if you're not going to craft a dedicated breach ring, I think the base could be anything. Most of the time, it should be one of the resistances or the rarity base. Rarity bases usually cost more, resistances cost less. So for a cheap approach, you can just set all possible damage to attacks to like tier 1s. Take Rarity, Cold, Fire, Lightning Resistance or Leech as an option right there, and just search for the bases. So as you can see, a lot of them go practically for like 2-3 divines. Personally, I believe that going for something like lightning damage usually feels a little better, but you can pick any ring that you want because most of those crafts are still RNG based and you'll probably need to do at least a few attempts. You will need to use Greater Essence of Opulence. The biggest upside for Greater Essence of Opulence is that it's given practically tier 1 rarity modifier when you're clicking it. So right here, as you can see, rarity is tier 1 for suffix, which is absolutely amazing, and it's a very rare case because most of the time essences are not giving you tier 1 modifier. So just desecrate it basically with Preserved Collarbone, and right here we have it. So after that, we will need to finish getting prefix and suffix. We will need to click 2 times separately with Greater Exalted Orbs. We are also going to use an Omen for additional quality. So first off, you can get catalysts. since we currently have on our ring lightning damage, we're probably going to get fire or we're going to get cold. So for that, we will need to apply Tal's Catalyst to the ring to get the maximum amount of quality, which is 20. Use Omen of Catalyzing Exaltation and hit it with Greater Exalted Orbs with Omen of Sinistral Exaltation 2 to try and get a proper prefix for the ring. Perfectly, it should be flat damage. So right here, instead, we got Accuracy, which is pretty unlucky, so probably redoing it would be worth it. So to just finish the rings that we currently have, I would recommend to click it once more with random Greater Exalted Orb without even bothering. We had Intelligence, I don't think it's worth to use a reroll, and we can just reveal as it goes. So since you're barely paying only 2 divines for the base, you can keep redoing the rings that way until you will hit something proper. And right here we got a second rarity, for example, which is probably going to stack pretty alright. If that would be a rarity base, it would be even better. So here, for example, we are doing a rarity base, which is kinda alright, 10 out of 15. Same, you go for Greater Essence of Opulence, you're getting a tier 1 rarity modifier, which is amazing. After that, you're clicking it with Tal's Catalyst. That's pretty much it. You ended up with 20. You can also use Sinistral Omen of Necromancy together with Preserved Collarbone. So after it, you're hitting it for a prefix, and you need to use Omen of Sinistral Exaltation together with at least 1 Greater Exalted Orbs. You can also use Perfect Exalted Orbs if you're absolutely sure about it and if your base is good enough, but most of the time just going for Greater should be good enough. However, in that case, let me showcase the process with Perfect Exalted. There's practically nothing changing. You're just hitting it with Omen of Catalyzing Exaltation, don't forget about that, to eat the cold modifier and get something out of it. Most of the time, I just recommend to use Greater Exalted Orb instead. So right here, we got a cold damage, which is pretty nice, especially if we will be able to hit 1 more flat. So for 1 more flat, we're going to use Omen of Abyssal Echoes just for additional reroll. So right here, we're going for reroll, don't forget the Omen of Abyssal Echoes. And we can get 1 more rarity, which is absolutely amazing for the rarity base. If I would have not a rarity base here, I would probably reroll and try to get flat, but instead I'm ending up with additional rarity. And it costs at least 10 divines considering we still have an open suffix. So to finish it up, just apply the catalyst. We are hoping to hit the cold, which will be pretty nice. And using Omen of Catalyzing Exaltation, you can just hit it with Exalted Orb. Perfectly, we're going to get 1 last resistance. So Catalyzing Exaltation and the last slam. Right here, we got a cold resistance, even tier 1, which is absolutely amazing. And I think we ended up with a very solid ring. At the moment, I think I ended up with crazy lucky craft, just because of the amount of rarity I have on that ring. At the moment, if you will just go for search, the search itself, it gives me about 230 divines per that ring. I honestly believe it's probably less than that, because there's a few downsides here and there, and a few things which are not tier 1, but most of the time, if you just keep recrafting your rings, I'm absolutely sure that you can hit something very nice. And just redoing rings all over and over the same way like you're doing weapons is probably recommended, but it's significantly easier with the rings, because you can get bases for only a few divines, and even if you're going like for rarity base, it's going to cost less. So talking about the breach rings, at the moment when we're talking about the breach rings, you need to keep in mind that most of the time it's done with a pretty inefficient way, when you're just blocking 1 particular modifier with Fracture, and after that, you're just spamming Chaos to get a second prefix. At the moment, I'm not really recommending to do that, because I believe it's a lot of RNG and even worse than the normal amount of RNG. So just using the methods that I showcased right now, I believe it's going to end up pretty good. However, if your budget is significantly higher, I could definitely recommend to just buy a breach ring instead, since that craft is wildly inefficient. However, if you actually aim to get the best possible rings, going for breach crafting is probably mandatory, But I definitely recommend to check the market before doing that, because it might be better option up there to just buy it. So I hope that video will help you out to craft some good items for yourself. Check out my craft for the rest of the items in the video in the description and in the pinned comment. And keep in mind that crafting 0.5 is a lot of RNG. Thank you very much for watching and good luck with crafting. ronarray out.